Hey there, this is Gene Pouliot. This is a new show that I'm trying to put together where I'm going to be reading from the scriptures and trying to make um, some sense out of them. And I think that I hope this is something that you find interesting and that we'll continue this from week to week. Today's reading, I'm just going to do, because of time pressures, I'm going to do a reading from the book of Genesis. This is the third Sunday of Lent, and this is a story about Moses and the rock. Here's the reading. uh, Genesis chapter 17. From the desert of Sin, the whole Israelite community journeyed by stages, as the Lord directed, and encamped at Rephidim. Here there was no water for the people to drink. They quarreled therefore with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to a test?" Here then, in their thirst for water, the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "Why did you ever make us leave Egypt? Was it just to have us die here of thirst with our children and our livestock?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? A little more, and they will stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go over there in front of the people, along with some of the elders of Israel, holding in your hand as you go the staff with which you struck the river. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock in Horeb. Strike the rock, and the water will flow from it for the people to drink." This Moses did in the presence of the elders of Israel. The place was called Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled there and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord in our midst or not?" Interesting story. But I was thinking about it. There's one of the things I was considering is that there really are three basic sets of characters in this in the story. One is God, the Lord God, who is kind of directing the show or in the background in some sense or other. There's Moses, who's leading the people, and who's the the direct the direct object of the people's frustration, and then everybody else. So there's God, Moses, and everybody else basically. And what's interesting is that if the Exodus narrative is to believe literally, and it's a good story, so let's go with it for right now. But these people had seen God perform all kinds of, had hit the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues, frogs and locusts and this, that, and the other thing, death of the firstborn, seen themselves being able to escape through the Red Sea. The water goes on both sides. They're able to walk through, sees the army of the Pharaoh wiped out. And now here they are, hardly any time at all later, and they're complaining. It's like, well, why did you lead us here? We came all this way, and what was the big idea? Why didn't you just leave us back in Egypt? We were slaves, but we were much better off. So we're seeing people having a real hard time dealing with being able to, kind of shuck that slave mentality, the mentality of having been oppressed, but, not having the ability to take responsibility for themselves and not being able to be, leaders, but at the same time complaining against the one guy who's trying to help them out. So where it gets interesting for me is that as we try to imagine ourselves being part of this narrative, who are we? There's one Moses, and there's one God who's giving Moses the ability to do miracles and feed the people. But there's a lot of complaining, quarrelsome, pain in the neck people to deal with. So if we're trying to see ourselves as Moses in this case, we probably really should be seeing ourselves more as a kind of the pain in the neck people. Somewhere in our midst, though, and it's not necessarily ministers or leaders or whatever, always in our midst there's somebody who's in some sense or other interceding with God, like saying, what am I going to do here? How can I deal with this problem? Probably many of these people don't think of themselves as talking to God and seeing themselves as being intermediaries with God, but in a sense they're being intermediaries with the divine. They're trying to find a way, how do I get through this problem? Nobody's listening to me. I know they're wrong. They need to find some way of dealing with this. Let me find it to them. They're complaining about everything to me, but somebody needs to be able to step up to the plate and help them out. As we contemplate this, we should be thinking about a couple things. One is that, there's times in life when we probably are the ones that can be that leader. We may be being groomed or called by the divine to become the leader who is able to break through for some people, provide for them some small miracle, some little bit of water to get them through the next phase in their journey. But also, I think we have to be humble and realize that, most of the time we're not that person, and that we should be thankful for those who are. Um, Oftentimes, we're the ones who complain the most about things being the way they are, and people not doing this and people not doing that. You know, we're the testers. We're the quarrelsome ones. Can we at least have enough spiritual gumption to be able to say, thank you. I'm not up to this right now, but I'm really appreciative of those folks who can. Let me see if I can at least help them in what they're doing. So, in the sense of, for all those times when we need water and someone else is able to provide that for us, let us be thankful. Let's be thankful for those folks who are able to, get beyond our grumpiness and our disinclinations and our lack of cooperation and our frustrations and maybe even our sabotage, to be able to actually continue to provide those little bits of water that spiritual water or however you want to call it, that gets us through that day. Thank you for those people, and they do for us the miracles that God is waiting for us to do. At least let's recognize them, even if we're grumpy the rest of the time. Thank you for watching. I hope this is something that's interesting. I'll continue becoming. Oh, I just lost my lights here. Hope this is something that continues to be an interesting and a fruitful discussion, and we'll continue to make this a better show and give it a name someday. And thank you for everything. Bye.